Thank you. Thanks for advertising my favorite activity during the Hackfest, swimming in the ocean. So, all right, everybody, thank you. Welcome to my talk, Accessibility Testing in WPT, From Dream to Reality. I kind of gave away the ending, but all right, so I don't think I need to sell this slide to this particular group that web standards or open standards are much better delivered when they come with a shared test suite. I think we're all in agreement on that particular fact here. It's great to write a technical specification, but you can't know if someone actually followed it unless it never breaks, or you can run some test suites and see that they're conformant. And probably all of you know about the web platform test suite, but just in case you don't, I'll give a little introduction. It's a set of, it's kind of hard to imagine someone doesn't know it who's at the Web Engine Hackfest, because it's a huge, important test suite that tests dozens of specifications. There's 120,000 test files. We have this great website, WPT.FYI, where browsers submit nightly runs or nightly of these of this whole full test suite. And so as standards are developed and new tests are added, you can see the implementation in the browser in real time on WPT.FYI. So that's great. But what does it mean to not have accessibility testing in WPT? For some context, when a browser is using an assistive technology like a screen reader, there are additional W3C standards that apply, and there are different code paths that are executed within the browser. And for a long time, WPT.FYI could tell you, as I said, the status of a new feature as it's been developed. But without accessibility testing, you couldn't actually tell if the accessibility support for that feature was complete or correct or even implemented at all. So you could not know from WPT if a new feature was implemented for all users or just for some. And to illustrate that, here's an illustration. Thank you, Alice. I've reused this illustration she made many times. On the screen, you can see there are two browser processes rendering content to two different users. The bottom user is someone who uses a screen to read a website. And inside, you can see something many of you are probably familiar with. The browser rendering process starts with a DOM tree in CSS, creates the layout box tree, and then a bunch of Paint compositor instructions and paints that to the screen. And so the other browser process has a few more layers. These are the untested layers that this talk is about. It starts with the same content, DOM and CSS, creates the layout box tree, and then from there we create something that the browsers call the computed accessibility tree, which gets information from the layout tree and also some information from the DOM. And the computed accessibility tree backs the platform accessibility APIs. And the platform accessibility APIs are operating system specific. They're the thing that assistive technology interacts with to get information from the web to assistive technology users. And they're the same, they're operating system specific. So an assistive technology uses the same accessibility APIs to interact with all the different programs on a particular computer. The computed accessibility tree might be something that some of you are familiar with if you ever made a website and inspected it in DevTools. You can see the computed accessibility tree. There's a way to navigate it to it in DevTools. It's very similar to the DOM tree. It's got a lot of the same concepts. There are some extra nodes, and there's some nodes that are missing, and there's some computation that goes on to get the correct information. I think that's covered it. Yes, so talking about testing the computed accessibility tree. It's something that for a long time people have thought that it would be really nice to have a way to test that tree that you can see in the DevTools, because it's platform independent, it's full of concepts that are familiar to website makers. But exposing that information to JavaScript is basically a no-go. People have tried, but it's just too computationally expensive to spin up the accessibility tree to get that information and serve it there. Luckily, people found a way around that, well, as best they could. We added some WebDrivers to two accessibility concepts, WebDriver endpoints to two accessibility concepts, role and name. And that was the first set of WPT tests that we got a couple years ago in 2023. We've written hundreds of tests just with these two API endpoints. The way that it works is you have an element in WebDriver and you can request the computed accessibility role or the computed accessibility name for that element. So just two pieces of the computed accessibility tree, but very powerful. And we're working also on another WebDriver endpoint, get computed accessibility properties, or actually it's get accessibility properties, which will return a lot of other attributes and also will return information about the parent and the children of that node, which is important because the computed accessibility tree is different than the DOM tree. So in WebDriver, it's elements, and from there you can get the structure of the accessibility tree. So that's very exciting, but I'm not actually going to talk any more about that in this talk, because to really know if there's full accessibility support, you need to test the platform accessibility APIs. That's the final mile of getting that information out of the browser to the assistive technology. And we already covered that its platform as an operating system. They're also basically trees, a lot of the same concepts, but each platform API was created independently, so there's a lot of differences in the design. And they're maintained by operating systems. They were created a long time ago for the basic UI components of an operating system, and so it moves much slower than the web moves, and it's something that we always have to try to translate these new web contents into these older accessibility APIs, which do get updated, but more slowly. And the ARIA working group of the W3C is the group that standardizes how websites are translated to or exposed in these accessibility APIs. We have a set of specifications which we call the AAMs, which is Accessibility API Mappings. So there is a long history of Igalia trying to solve for this lack of tests in WPT, or in the world, basically. In 2027, Joni Diggs at Igalia was the chair of the ARIA working group, and she wrote and maintained a set of tests that she checked into WPT. They're called manual, though, so they're not run by the normal WPT runner. She had another program that could help run them, but they were always partially manual. And she used them for generating the proof of adequate implementation experience when publishing ARIA 1.1. So in the W3C, when you want to publish a specification to recommendation, you need to provide proof of adequate implementation experience. So you don't need to, it's not required that you write tests, but you need to somehow show that implementations are following your specification. So how are you going to do that? We gotta write tests, basically. Then in 2022, now I'm chair of the ARIA working group, and we're trying to publish ARIA 1.2, and we need to show adequate implementation experience. So I reused a Chromium utility. I wrote a script to translate Joni's manual tests, and it was a bit of another Frankenstein's monster of a test runner. So it wasn't like a way forward to like a standardized test suite. And then finally, 2 years ago, some things are so obvious in retrospect, but in 2024, it finally occurred to me that the WPT test harness is written in Python. And there are Python bindings for all of the accessibility APIs. So automated tests should be possible in WPT. We just have to write them. And I opened an RFC, Alice and I wrote a couple years ago. But the reason that they're not in WPT is because there's a few problems you have to solve first, and someone needs to solve those problems, so slowly they all got solved. The first one is just how to design these tests and testing APIs. They're different in some critical ways than the other tests in WPT, even though WPT tests lots of different kinds of things. You have to handle platform-specific results, which WPT doesn't have. It's pretty cross-platform. The web is mostly cross-platform concepts. You have to find the right browser in the accessibility API, and you need to turn on this accessibility part of the browser for these tests in particular. So about the design, this was the first try. This is my modification, the first thing I tried of a test harness, using the test harness style test in WPT. And the test harness style test is just an HTML file with some JavaScript. And we have this utility called testdriver where you can request that the WPT runner do things like query the browser over WebDriver. So this test, this initial idea is just I decide to implement something like get platform accessibility node. So I asked the backend to send me a bunch of information for the accessibility node for that based on a element ID. So we're testing this div with role block quote. But this, you might already imagine it's a bit awkward because I'm asking from JavaScript for something that's platform specific. And so the node has to say, okay, well, this is a node that represents this accessibility API. And then you also have to take this complicated accessibility API and like somehow put it into a JSON object and deliver it to the front end. Another thing that we thought about doing was actually these accessibility APIs are written in Python. So maybe we could just have a Python string that does the assertions or tests and send that to the backend, and then the backend executes that. Anyway, it's pretty awkward, and it worked, but it wasn't great. And luckily, someone read the RFC and was like, hey, Val, this was Fulip. Don't you know about the WD spec tests, which I did not know about? They're Python tests that test WebDriver implementations, and it's just a test that's all in Python, basically. And based on that, inspired by that, I wrote a new test type, the AAM test, and they're much cleaner and look, they're very great. Every test file has some markup that we're testing the mappings of, and then there's a subtest for each accessibility API that will run only on the appropriate operating system. So that's great. We solved problem number one. And next is how to handle platform-specific test results. I mean, part of it was in the design of the tests, having a test for each platform that only runs when necessary by the harness. But the other thing is how to report it to WPT.FYI. And this is actually maybe also an obvious in retrospect kind of thing, but originally I wanted to have its own test type, something like not applicable, but it would have just been a new paradigm in WPT.FYI because all tests that aren't pass, all subtests that aren't passes, contribute to the total subtest count. So if you wanted a summary of how all of these mappings were maintained by a browser on a specific operating system, it wouldn't be clear because you would say it passes 15 out of 45 tests, but you don't know how many of those tests actually apply to that operating system. So if you see these tests in WPT.FYI, missing just means it's not applicable. And we could change that if anyone wants to. Okay, so that was that, problem solved. Next is how to find the right browser in the accessibility API, which is basically the browser started by WebDriver, and then we need to find the browser in the accessibility API. We can do that by PID, or we can do that by name. But if you do it by name, then you can't parallelize, or you can't even run these tests while you're surfing the web. So ideally by PID. But after you start the browser with WebDriver, you actually don't have the PID of that browser. You still have to figure it out. Luckily, coolly, Gecko Driver, the implementation for Firefox, does just return the PID by default, so I did the same in Chrome Driver. And so it works for Firefox and Chrome on all of the operating systems, but you still have to find the browser by name for Edge and Safari, and this is where I start to ask for help from the crowd. If someone wants a small project this week and has a Windows computer or Mac, and they want to make a patch, maybe we could land that. That would be great. Great. Next, last problem is how to turn on accessibility in the browser for these tests. The WPT test harness can restarts the browser when encountering these tests, so we can turn on accessibility then. And Firefox and Chrome, this can be done with a command line flag, but that's not true for Safari. And luckily, because of this, motivated by this test suite, Tyler Wilcock at Apple is adding this feature. So I'm very thankful for that. And for Edge, it should be the same as Chrome, but I don't have a Windows computer. So if someone has a Windows computer and also wants to write a patch to WPT this week, you can find me and we can figure it out. I bet it'll be very satisfying because a bunch of tests will suddenly run on Edge and WPT. Great, so yeah, that's the status of the problems, mostly solved. And a month ago, the AM test infrastructure was merged, so you can see these tests in WPT.FYI, which is very exciting. And you can write tests of the Linux accessibility API, the Mac API, one of the Windows accessibility APIs. There's two of them. I didn't mention that. It's a little bit weird, but they're two and they're both relevant. But Theo Hale, who's independent, just opened a PR for UIA support, which is in progress. So yeah, it's great. We have full support for Chrome and Firefox, and Safari and Edge, like I said, needs a few more steps. And if you want to help with those, it would be great. I'd love that. And the last slide is just thank you everybody for who has ever reviewed one of these PRs or brainstormed issues over the last couple of years. And also thank you NLNet. I meant to put them on this slide, but I forgot. NLNet, we got some funding from NLNet to like push this over the finish line. So yeah, that's it. That's a talk.
Thank you, Valerie. Do we have questions?
Hi, thank you for the talk. Have you found any like actual accessibility issues or issues across browsers that maybe we didn't know about before through this work?
Yeah, already. I mean, there's only like, we can go look right now, but there's only a few tests that have been pushed because basically I've been busy with other work. But from those tests, we can look. Let's look. I'm navigating to the core AAM folder. Core AAM is one of the mappings, accessibility API mapping specifications. In WPT, all the folders are named after the spec name. So in Core AAM, you can see these are just the tests that I've added so far. And it's broken on Edge. As you can see, those are all error. But on Firefox, on Linux, and Chrome on Linux, they run. But you can see that there are some failures on Firefox. So Firefox doesn't implement the spec. And this is kind of unfair for Firefox. Chrome also has some failures yet too, but I haven't pushed those tests or landed them. Don't worry. But yeah, they're minor issues, but now we're talking about them. It's crazy because these AMs have been around forever. And these are all the role tests. So the nodes, as they're exposed, like what is this thing? Is it a search box or a radio or a paragraph? And there's some differences between the two browsers. So yes, we're already finding bugs, and there's going to be a lot more. Yeah.
You were talking about Edge. This is loud. You're talking about Edge and that you couldn't test it because you don't have a Windows machine. Edge also runs on Linux and Mac, but are these issues that need Windows specifically?
Good question. That's funny that I didn't know that Edge runs on Windows, but it seems obvious that it should. Yeah, I don't know. I honestly, I just haven't dug into why it's failing. So maybe I could figure that out on my computer today.
Testing. Hello, I'm Euclid. I have some experience writing WD spec tests and test driver tests and have some experience with WebDriver. And I'm on a Windows laptop, so if you need help, we can talk.
Oh, awesome. Great.
Would you kindly run us through one of these tests? I'm just curious.
You just want to look at it?
Yeah.
Like the code?
Yeah.
Okay.
They're in Python,
Yeah.
right? A lot of the WPTs are HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, so this is quite different.
Yeah, I could do that really quick.
If you go back to the WPT page, you can just view on the master branch, the parentheses master branch. If you click that,
Wait, what?
right at the top, it says view source on GitHub, parentheses master
Oh.
branch. Click that and it will take you directly to the file.
You know, I've thought so many times, I wish there was that button. Oh, so silly. Okay, yeah, so here, can you see? Yeah, because it's so big. Let's not look at this one. Okay, so another thing is that the grant that I got will only, because it's an open source software, it only funded me working on the Linux API. So that's why awkwardly there's only the Linux API tests in most of them. Later I will write the other, or someone will write the other tests. Anyway. Block quote. Yes. Okay. This is a test of block quote, as I said before. If people are not familiar with PyTests, the way that PyTests work is that you have, it finds the functions that start with test underscore, and then there's this idea of a fixture, which is the name of the argument in the test file. So ATSBI is a test fixture that then when running the test, there's another fixture function called ATSBI that's executed, and then the return of that function is passed in here as the argument. So there's three fixtures, and the first one, it wraps the accessibility API. So the tests, for every one of the tests that I've submitted, they're test underscore and then the API name, because we have a test per API name. So what each of these subtests test the mapping for an API of block quote, which is, I think you might want to see this, which is the core AM specification, and it will clarify, it'll show you in spec language, which I'm sure you all love. Okay, so here's the block quote mapping. So something with role block quote should show up in these accessibility APIs with this information or these concepts. And so the test is a direct parallel to that. You can see every API has a concept of a node because they're trees, so there's nodes in the tree. And there's a helper for every API called find node, which will get you the node that you want based on ID. And then from there, you can just query the accessibility API for that node. So that's what this ATSBI get role, that's how you get the role in the ATSBI accessibility node. And these tests aren't super interesting because role is a pretty straightforward concept in all of the APIs. And AX API is the Windows one. IA2 is one of the Windows ones. And then there's just a placeholder for the UIA test. And does that enough of a walkthrough? The APIs you have to read the documentation basically to figure out how to test it. And it's a little bit special, but yeah, I can help you. If you want to write a test of something, I can help you this week. Yeah.
Hello. I'm wondering, for things that pop up UI, like for instance, the permissions dialog or things like that, can this handle checking those things?
Yeah. So there's WebDriver also available on these tests, so you can have interactive tests eventually. And right now, there's only support to find an element in the accessibility tree by ID, but you could easily extend it to do something like try to find an accessibility element by its actual role in the tree or something like that. So yeah, everything's exposed in the tree, and you have Python in the whole accessibility API to get anything you want out of it. So you could write tests of anything, basically.
What if it's not so imagine when you call alert, for instance, or
yeah. That's in the accessibility tree.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yeah, so you should be able to find it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Fantastic work. Thanks for doing it. My question is, a lot of developers, me included, are misleaded by the accessibility tree because you look at it and when it looks right, you think job done. But then come people in the actual accessibility community and say yeah, wait a second. JAWS or whatever does not actually look at this and not make sense of it correctly and so on. So my question is there any way that the test that you wrote could be used by producers of assistive tech to check their implementations against what they should be reporting?
That's a great question. I think that the answer to your question is actually the real final mile of getting accessibility content to a screen reader user, for example, is whether or not the screen reader supports what the browser is doing. Because it's another program that as the web evolves, then the assistive technology also has to evolve. And there are some initiatives to try to figure out how to test the whole end-to-end from web to assistive technology. There's a community group of the W3C called ARIA-AT, and there's also Lola, who's right there. Lola, raise your hand. Lola is trying to figure out, and Cynthia too, wherever Cynthia is, there, Cynthia, how to do some kind of like, can I use that includes the whole path? So this is just like one part of it, basically, or like a place in the middle or near the end, whatever. But yeah, this problem we're also trying to solve. And thank you for asking about it.
Hello. I was wondering, is it possible with those tests to test dynamic updates? So like you made a dynamic update in the page and it's supposed to fire a notification,
yeah.
that kind of thing.
That's a great question. So yeah, I almost brought that up earlier, but another goal of this test suite is to be able to test events. So accessibility APIs have concepts of events to say when something changed in the page or when you've changed something in the page. And that, again, these APIs are right here. You could probably figure out how to write a test to get the accessibility API, an event, to make sure an event happened or a page changed. You can like query the page again. But I just haven't written any utilities for that, which I want to make it easy to test accessibility events. But yeah, it's possible. It will be.
So why has it taken so long to get these tests? Not criticizing you, but why didn't browsers write these
question.
when they were writing the WPT tests in the first
Why?
place? And then could you tell me more about the process it took for Igalia to actually get funding to do this, including the internal sponsorship?
Yeah. It's just, I think it's a big question of why do things happen or not happen in the open web world. It's just, why do browsers prioritize some things and not others? Accessibility, I think, is often something that we're trying to fight to get more funding or be treated at the same level as every other important feature of the web. And yeah, basically just no one spent the time. All of the browsers do test their accessibility APIs. And so before having a test suite, I just looked at the browser tests to see if something was working or not. But it's a lot to keep track of. And so why were these tests not added to WPT? It's just that no one had enough time. Or like Joni and I tried, but we did it in ways that weren't great, so we gave up when we first approached the problem. And then, let's see. So this most recent, one thing that Igalia does actually is fund me to be the chair of the ARIA working group. Also, we fund Joni to work on Orca screen reader. And so some of this work has been done as part of my chairing responsibility. So thank you, Igalia, for funding this work. And also, Alice and I had a Sovereign Tech Fund grant to do something unrelated, sort of related, and we actually ended up fitting in doing a little bit of the early work on this under the Sovereign Tech Fund, which is a grant organization for open source maintenance. And then NLNet is another grant organization that funds accessibility work, so we just asked them for some money as well, and we got some to work on Linux APIs.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
Okay, so you said that the first attempt was written in JavaScript and you migrated to the Python. Mm-hmm. Can you elaborate why Python is better here?
Oh, it's just Python is better because the accessibility APIs are in Python. So, and it's just nicer to write the test suites directly against the accessibility APIs in Python.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Wait, Stephen raised his hand so enthusiastically. Can we answer Stephen's questions?
We have 2 questions here, but let's keep it short. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for the presentation. It's a generic one now with this advent of AI and all this vibe coding. How much do you think can it impact accessibility, like getting more tests done, getting more automation run? We heard something about WPT automation running like completely by AI in BlinkOn this year, I think. So how do you think AI can help, or do you think it's going to be better?
I think that someone could probably ask AI to, with a few examples, write a bunch of these tests. And AI probably will be used for accessibility purposes in the future, I'm guessing. I mean, I think it's coming, but Stephen.
Yeah, okay, so I view this as only useful if whenever you add any HTML or CSS feature that hits accessibility, that you also write these tests.
Yeah.
So can we make that happen on the standard, like, you know, on the you must check this box that you have accessibility tests before you merge your spec PR?
Let's do that.
Because we need it, otherwise this will just atrophy.
Yes, let's do that. Great idea. We're here, we can make it happen. Okay, cool. Thank you, everybody. That's it, right?
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you, Valerie.